Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and on this Thursday afternoon, I am delighted to be joined by Brian Degnan and Quinny. Quinny, we were there last night at the fan zone. We watched the game. Now that the dust has settled, what was your overall view of the match in Belgrade last night?
It's a funny one. I think when I previewed the game, for the draw, I thought a draw away, and this one was pretty much like par for the course. It's pretty much where we should be at. Coming into the game, I got a bit more optimistic. As is kind of, the done thing, isn't it? And I thought we going into it, we could win it. And certainly throughout watching the game, I thought it was there to be won. So I don't know. I'm kind of not really feeling too positive or negative either way about it. There was some decent bits in it, some nice takeaways. But it could have been a little bit more with the chances we missed on the night. And Brian, nice to meet you, by the way.
Is this your first appearance together? I didn't realise that. Brilliant to bring Swindon and Quinny together. This is the thing. I watched that game this morning, Brian, for my sins. Last night, Quinny and I watched it live. We were at the fan zone. There was a massive issue with the screen in the building, so we all went in the backyard, put the heaters on, and watched it on the big screens out there instead. And it's always different when you watch it back, I think, Brian, where you actually analyse it, because last night I was feeling disappointed that we didn't win the game simply because we had some really good clear-cut chances. And I thought we should have been a wee bit more decisive. When I looked at their goal, the equaliser, it's one of the ones you just think it's so avoidable. It just clips the back of somebody's heel and it's not going to go through. But so that was frustrating because it wasn't a quality goal. I thought our goal was extreme quality. But when I watched it back this morning, I do think there's more positives to take from last night's performance. There are some concerns, and that's why I'm leading with qualities and concerns from last night. We'll dig into these individual qualities and concerns, Brian, but overall, how did you feel we did over in Serbia?
Well, first of all, two things, Quinny. It's an absolute pleasure, mate. And second of all, I was trying to find a pair of glasses so I could dress up as JP today. That's why I've got my hat on. I thought it might be a seamless disguise, but he's a bit cleverer than me, so I don't think I'd have pulled it off. I think the game generally, if you'd have said to me before the game, we take a draw away from home to kick off the campaign, I'd have said absolutely. But I think watching it, I thought Red Star were pretty poor, if I'm honest. And as I watched the game, I started getting frustrated, thinking, they're there for the taking. We can absolutely, if we just pick up the tempo a bit here, we can absolutely win this. We can get off to a flyer here. So it was kind of strange by the end of it where I felt a little twinge of disappointment because I thought we're good enough to beat them. In terms of the game itself, I was so disappointed in some of the players. I thought some of the players were really, really poor. And I imagine we'll dig into some of the specifics around that and some of the positives and negatives. But for the first half, I was like, the football's ponderous. It's boring. Even the way at one point, Schmeichel kind of rolled it to Carter Vickers, who kind of rolled it to Scales, who looked for Tierney, rolled it to him, rolled it back. And it wasn't even I understand the passing it about to find the pockets of space that I get. But it was even the pace of those 10-yard passes at the back. They just seemed no urgency in the game at the start. And it was really frustrating because I say, looking at Red Star, I thought, they're nothing to be scared of. We're at their ground. They don't look like they're dominating. They had a couple of good chances, don't get me wrong, and you expect that. But we looked the better side, and yet we're so sort of ponderous about it. And we never seemed to get out of second gear. Certainly in the first half anyway. Second half was better.
Going into the game, Brian, one of the things I found quite difficult was to try and rate Red Star Belgrade, right? Because we all know going into the Kairat game, we're getting told, this is the equivalent of a St Johnstone if you were going to look at their rankings, etc., etc. So having a look at them last season in their Champions League endeavours, in the playoff round of the Champions League to get into the league stage, they faced a team that have been getting a lot of plaudits and deservedly so in Bodo Glimt. And they beat Bodo Glimt 3-2. And I know I'm going back to we are as well compared to last season, but some of their results weren't too bad. I know that they lost the majority of their games, Quinny, but if you try and compare and contrast, they beat Young Boys 1-0, same as us. They beat Stuttgart 5-1, reasonable result, I would have thought. You know, Milan beat them 2-1 in Italy. PSV Eindhoven beat them 3-2. So Barcelona beat them 5-2. So I'm looking at some of these results. Benfica beat them 2-1. And I think to myself, maybe they are a fairly decent side. And I'm reading a lot coming through here, and I'm going to bring up some of these. The Brooklyn Brawler. There we go. That sounds like some kind of WWF wrestler from 1988.
It was back in the day, back in the
Was
90s,
it?
the Brooklyn Brawler, aye. He just
There you
came out
go.
the ring with a big cigar and a flat cap and get battered all the time.
All right.
Sorry.
Well, I'm not going to do that to the Brooklyn Brawler who's in the comment section, but I will bring up his comment. Open your eyes. They were rubbish and we were rubbish. Listen, if analysing the game was as easy as that, it would only last 20 seconds. I watched the game back this morning, and as I say, I'm going to pull as many positives as I can from the performance. Red Star Belgrade, going over there, I think it was one of the trickier away ties, Quinny. And someone was showing me the 73-metre walk down the tunnel to get on the park and all this kind of stuff, and the ultras behind. But beyond all that, the team in rain and all that kind of stuff, I'm going to start trying to pull some of the positives from this. So going into the game last night, Quinny, I said to Chris, you know, what I want is I want my established campaigners to step up and perform last night. So who are they? Which players have had, you know, Champions League campaigns under their belts? Which Celtic players have got success with this football club who should be stepping up and saying, you know, we're the old heads here, and some of the rookies and some of the new guys, you know, we'll lead the way. And those players were, for me, Kasper Schmeichel in goals, of course. Your two centre halves. Who, you know, they've played plenty of games at this level and higher. Left back Kieran Tierney, I think, has to be one of those veterans, those campaigners. You move into the midfield, and I'm looking at Callum McGregor, but I'm also looking at Vio because I'm thinking there's no excuse for you not to take control of a game like this. And then up top, you are looking at Dyson Maeda. The rest of them are either new players or kind of rookies, as I said. How do you think the established players did last night? Because I was disappointed with some of them.
Yeah, I think you know, we had this kind of chat when we were there yesterday as well. I think, like, just to talk quickly about we were rubbish, they were rubbish a little bit as well. Like, they had goal threat in this game. They did score a goal. They were probably quite deserved of scoring a goal in the game with some of the chances they did make, to be fair to them. But like I say, it was very much a game. It was very winnable. You know, like, we had more than enough chances to win it when it was all said and done. So I'm kind of with you on, you know, that we didn't win it, and that is rubbish. But, like, you know, a few of the chances, you know, Negren's one is up there with Maeda's against Kairat. You know, is like just that just should have hit the net. You know, no two ways about it. But those experienced campaigners you mentioned there, like Schmeichel and Tierney, I think are more than worthy of being in there. But even if you know, this is like Carter Vickers, Scales, McGregor, Hatate, Maeda, have all been at Celtic for like 4 or 5 seasons. You know, so they've played the Europa League campaign with Ange, where we had. I said this to you last night. I can't remember who else was in the group, but I know we had Leverkusen. I just remember seeing Wirtz and all that. It was just a fun game in that regard. You know, I don't think it went terribly well for us on the night. And then ever since then it's been Champions League. Betis, yeah, Leverkusen, Betis, and then I can't remember who the other one was. But then ever since then it's been Champions League. So we've played Real Madrid, we've played Atletico Madrid. You know, we've had really big games, really high intensity, elite level, and those guys coming into the Europa League should be a step up in class. They should be a step up in trip, you know. And the only one of them that is anywhere near that is Scales, you know, by, you know, some distance, I think. You know, McGregor last night, like, I hate to sound like a broken record with it, but there's moments where it's not even splitting passes or eye of the needle stuff, but he should just be a bit more direct, you know. He should just be a little bit more forward. And it just, like, gives us another pass to make. It gives them another wee bit of time to, you know, shift around and do whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And Hatate, Hatate comes out of the game like as a fail. I think, like, didn't do well in the match. But the thing with Hatate is that game he played last night would look the exact same if you look at any of his good matches. You take out the goals and assists or whatever. The way he plays is always quite much the same. He runs around everywhere. I thought he was great, like, in covering the pitch. You know, he was defending, he was attacking, he was joining counter-attacks, but nothing came off him. You know, he just had no end product. He just had no actual, like, you kind of said, grab the game by the scruff of the neck, and I do agree he should be able to do that. But it's never really been his thing. It's more about knitting it together or finishing these kind of moves off. And again, I remember watching. I remember going to Celtic Real Madrid, and Hatate and Modric were like shoulder to shoulder the whole game. And I don't think Hatate really got any change off him or anything. But I remember thinking coming out that game, and I've probably said it on a video somewhere, like it felt like Hatate was really like measuring him up and like being next to like the perfect person for his position, if you get me, and like not necessarily like learning from him on the pitch or whatever, but getting a sense of like how he touches the ball, where he moves, and all that kind of stuff. And I felt off the back of that, we got a good kind of upturn in him. And you want to see those improvements in your players. Like if you're going to be a Celtic player for 4 or 5 years, those campaigns, those experiences, we want to see that compound into the player and make them better. So that, remember, they're in Europa League against Red Star. They go out there like, I'm a Champions League player. I've went shoulder to shoulder with Modric's and all the rest of it. And who am I against tonight? Elsnik, right? Come on, wee man, let's go for it, And none of them are really doing that. Maybe Vickers is in the conversation a wee bit, but Scales, I think, last night was brilliant.
I totally agree with that. And I think you've probably illustrated it a bit better than myself there, Quinny, with regards to the fact that you're meant to be building up this confidence and building up your ability to then be that player. And I'm not saying Hatate becomes Modric, but be that player that has all the experience and has all the tools. And I'm not seeing enough of it. By the way, watching it back today, I don't know how much distance he covered on the park, but him and Nygren covered an incredible distance on the park. But as you say, there was just not that cutting edge to Rio's game. There's a lot of concerns coming in. And I'm keen to bring in your comments because obviously we've all watched the game. We all have opinions. So let's bring in some differing opinions as well. John, I hope you enjoyed the game. You were messaging us yesterday or the day before when you were having an airport pint on your way. So hopefully you enjoyed the experience and didn't catch a cold. Flying Haggis, Iheanacho could have had a hat-trick. He could have, when I was watching it back today, actually, the chance that he scored was probably the most difficult, arguably, of the three. Brilliant goal, quality finish for his goal. Totally agree with that as well. And it was, the thing with that, I tweeted about it this morning, Brian, because we got him under, I think, less than ideal circumstances. Iheanacho, right? Absolutely. There's no doubting that we were chasing Dolberg. I mean, Dolberg was, this summer's Eddie Howe, right? And we chased him, and then we failed. We failed at the last hurdle. And come on, because people were arguing the toss about this. Iheanacho was an absolute emergency signing. He was an emergency signing from Brendan Rodgers, who had worked with him before. And I remember when we did sign him, the sense that it was completely underwhelming, right? But that again is nothing to do with the player. That was because of the way we had failed to do our business properly. We didn't get our top target. And I don't know, Lauren sometimes talks about us having 5 or 6 like main targets for every position, Brian. I don't know on that list where Iheanacho was. But let's just say it wasn't the top 2 or 3, right? And he was lambasted, and it was all to do with his weight and his fitness, and there was kind of memes, and there was clips going about of him being useless. What I seen last night was a player on absolute fire. The dynamic changed at halftime when he came on. We were talking about it, Quinny and I, because I was always criticising Ida. Ida just wanted to be a penalty box player, I think. But what Brendan wanted from him was to drop deep, take that ball from Callum McGregor so that he didn't pass it back to the centre half. Maybe turn and find a winger, hold the ball up, that kind of thing that Rodgers spoke about after the game last night. Ida wasn't prepared. He didn't have the work ethic for it, Brian, because once you've released the ball, you then need to get back into your position between the sticks and hope that something comes in. Iheanacho was brilliant at that last night. He was absolutely tremendous at it. So I think he's starting to prove a lot of people wrong, Brian.
Well, we certainly hope so. I mean, I think we Iheanacho, the key thing for me is going to be how he does that over the season, because I think for what I've sort of read, and actually for what Joe Hart was sort of saying in commentary, there's been up and downs in terms of his personality and how his sort of attitude. Not necessarily have a bad attitude, just a sort of unusual. So, he might one of those guys that sort of flutters in and out a little bit. So we need to see how he performs over the season. But certainly you could tell, we speak a lot and have spoken a lot about Maeda's best position, right? A lot of people say it's through the middle, a lot of people say it's through left. But you could see the difference between someone who's naturally a striker and someone who plays as a striker. And Iheanacho, the difference he made to the entire game, the way he linked up the play. And actually, you saw a really good example of it against Partick for Taneki's goal, where he should have took that touch and just played it first time without just knowing he was going to come in.
Yeah.
Just that instinctual, that first touch to kill it, and that little bit of quality pass. And that's the difference in striker. Now, I'm not slating me either. He was rotten last night, to be fair, and we'll come to that, but I'm not slating him in general. But there is a difference between someone who's naturally a striker and a type of striker that fits that system and one that isn't. You saw that with Kyogo. Kyogo never really worked under Rodgers. It was just the fact that he had such individual quality, he was still scoring goals, but it never seemed to quite fit the way Rodgers wanted him. I think Ian Urah's probably a closer fit to that. It's interesting you say about Ida, because it's another damning indictment of our recruitment, really. Because as much as I like Ida, and I thought he more than contributed, the fact that we signed him, paid 9 million for him, and he wasn't quite the right guy for the system goes well. Begs the question why we signing him, right? So that's an interesting thing. And I totally agree with Quinny about Hatate, actually. I think there was no lack of endeavour from Hatate, but with the amount of space he was getting last night, a player of his quality and vision should have done far better with the ball. So I thought Engels should have started, especially in Europe, because I think that off the ball, he covers a lot of ground. He's big, he's strong, he's fast, and people say he doesn't do enough on the ball, and I do agree, but off the ball, I think he's really essential for us in Europe for that sort of athletic profile. And Hatate was doing that, but what you expect from Hatate is on the ball considerably more. Now, he was better in the second half, and I think that's because of Ian, because he knew when to pass to him, he knew when to pass by him, he knew when he was pulling the defender wide so he could make a pass. Even McGregor benefited in the second half from Ian as well, I think. Although I have to say, I thought McGregor was awful in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
Now, regular viewers will know I love McGregor. I think he's excellent. I said years ago, I think he's one of the most underrated Scottish players ever. I genuinely think technically as a player, he could have played in Spain, Germany, somewhere like that. I think he's really, really good. And I think it would have cost us a lot a couple of years ago to try and replace a player of his quality. But this season, and it was the tail end of last season, I think he's been lacking. And I don't know if that's because he needs a Bernardo next to him to do his running for him, or an Engels. But he looked, at times, especially in that first half, he looked lost. Like the ball was he seemed to just pass him by at times. Now, he did step up a bit in the second half, and I think it's because he was a bit further forward, where he's clearly better. And that's something Rodgers has to consider, because when McGregor's effective, as I say, he is excellent. And at times last night, second half, he was particularly, there was like a 10-minute spell, he was the best player in the park. But he should have a 90-minute spell where he's one of the best players in the park. He's the captain, and that's historically what it has been. And if he can't do that because his legs are going a bit, then put a Bernardo or an Engels next to him and let them do the work for him. Let him just find the space and dictate play, or push him further forward. So I found that a bit strange. And then again, just to sort of echo what Quinny was saying defensively, I thought Scales was really good. I kind of, it's almost a bit of a joke now when people criticise Scales, I think, because it's because they've had it in their head for when he first came back, he's no good enough, and that was the tagline. He's not as good as Starfelt, we need somebody to replace him. But I think he's gradually get better and better and better. And, I can guarantee when Starfelt left, he was a world beater, and we should never let him go, and he was the best centre-half I've ever had, right? When Scales leaves, eventually, why let Scales go? He's the best player, right? We're a fickle bunch, and that's the way it is. But I thought he was really, really good last night. I know a few of his forward passes went awry, but he was trying to make things happen. He was driving with the ball. He was picking up good positions. I actually thought Tierney was good last night. I thought he seemed to pick and choose when he bombed, which is probably clever for him. I think that's what you see from him. He's not going to do it all the time the way he used to. But I thought defensively he was solid. Carter Vickers was absolutely solid as well. The big man put himself about. But for me, Donovan, I think we need to talk about Donovan. I think that boy's been excellent since he's come in the team. And I think last night, late in the game, Negrin started to fade about 70 minutes, around about that 75-minute mark, and wasn't as effective. But we did see in that right side where that gap was, Donovan was bombing. It was as if he sort of sensed it and sort of tried to work that bit harder to help him out. His maturity beyond his years, I thought his crossing was excellent. And I thought there was at one point he got caught out and he managed to track himself back and save the ball from a corner and play it out. I really thought he was excellent last night.
It was brilliant. Aye, absolutely. And I think when we were going into the game, we were talking, Brian, about how how to develop young talent, because it's something we've been banging the drum about on here for 8 years now. You know, the fact that we don't produce enough youngsters. And
need to start playing them sometimes as well. You need to give them a chance sometimes as well. That's a good starting point. But
this is the thing going into this European game, Brian, because you're bringing back a player in Tony Ralston who's fit, ready to go, who has the experience, and you could have played it safe. I was delighted to see that Donovan made the starting 11. And then you're like, right, this is his European debut. How's he going to do? And so I've been reading the comments from Brendan Rodgers with interest about the character of this player, the fact that nothing phases him. He's scared of nothing. I love the attitude. 19 years of age. And you can see that, you know, even like at set pieces, etc., Schmeichel's talking through the game, Brian. You can see it. He's brilliant. He's got that influence. It's crazy that he's 20 years his elder, Kasper Schmeichel, in goals, isn't it? It's amazing. But I thought Donovan was brilliant. I watched it again. I'll tell you what, I think he was brilliant in spite of who was playing in front of him. And it's not an opportunity to have a dig, but he was basically up that right-hand side on his own, to the point, actually, where I think Nygren did more on the right wing than Yang did, just by drifting out to the right wing. And obviously, he picks the ball up on the right and brings it in for the eventual goal by Ian Urah. But yeah, Colby Donovan, absolutely brilliant, and an appreciation thread for Donovan, I would say. And he stays in. In fact, if he keeps this up, he stays in the team until Arthur Johnson comes back.
I think. Sorry.
On you go.
No, I was just going to say, like, even with you know, I think you're absolutely right about staying in the team. But even when Arthur Johnson comes back, he's going to have to perform because there's going to be a question mark over Johnson's future as well. I know he's been linked already with moves. Doesn't mean he's going anywhere, right? But Donovan's going to be thinking, I can run him close here, because Johnson's got to think, yeah, this boy's done well. And I don't think, you know, and I'm not going to dig at Ralston because I love Ralston as well, but the drop off from Johnson to Donovan is less than the drop off, in my opinion, so far than from Johnson to Ralston. And I think that's going to be really key. And I think if the boy keeps going, you know, I think that Rodgers, I mean, he says he doesn't play favourites, that's debatable, but he has spoke a lot about what he likes about Donovan. And it's the same as what he, and I can't resist a plug, what he likes about the boy Murray. It's that attitude, you know, that real sort of top level, elite, train as you play, look after your body, live your life the right way, work hard, wait for your opportunity, take your opportunity when it comes, listen and learn. And he's spoken about the same things. So I think that actually you're spot on. And I think that Arthur Johnson could be in a fight to get his place back, genuinely.
What a great position to be in, because when you look at the lack of youth players coming through, the fact that someone told me recently that we now have the highest average age of a squad since 2003. You need guys like Donovan to come in. It's crazy, Quinny. That was just last Friday what I was talking about that. Absolutely crazy. So Donovan, I thought, was brilliant, and you know, defensively, but he does like going forward. And I think I'd need to double check this. There was a moment where there's a through ball, and the biggest issue for me with Maida in the first half was the amount of times he was caught offside. Right, you think to yourself, come on, it's almost like an attention thing. Pay attention, focus. You know, tune in to what's happening around about you. But there was one occasion where, honestly, if he's not offside, if he just times he's run that wee bit better, it's a 1-on-1. I'm not saying Maida would score that because I've seen him missing a few, but it's a 1-on-1. And it was that kind of ball that I think Donovan's looking to play quite a bit as well. He tries a dink over the top, you know, McGregor style dink over the top as well. Didn't quite come off. But I think he's building in confidence. And it's another one of the ones, Quinny, now that he's got that European game under his belt, you think to yourself, right, Hibs at the weekend, no bother, bring it on.
I think he was probably our best player in progressing the ball last night, you know, actually getting it from the middle of the pitch into the front. Like, there was a really nice moment for, by the way, I just want to say, just before I talk about Donovan, somebody in the chat said Scales can't pass water. If you look at Nygren's sitter, it's Scales, it clips one over the top for Tierney. He doesn't always make them, but he can make them. So just check the highlights if you missed it. But with Donovan, like, there was a nice moment in the first, or no, it must have been the second half, where he like actually just comes inside for like 4 yards and then just passes the ball with like his pinky toe back around the corner to Nygren, and that then goes on to make a bit of a chance. And it's just all those little things like that where he just does something a bit different to move an opponent to make the person he's about to give the ball's job a little bit easier, you know. Whereas that's probably a nice way of thinking about maybe the criticism of McGregor and Tati, where they're not taking someone out of the picture for a second to get someone else a head start on, when they get possession of the ball. And Donovan did that all the way up the right-hand side. I do agree. I don't think Yang really gave as much. Forrest was a notable introduction into the game. And look, that's what you want Forrest for in the squad, is that heavy 20 minutes where he just turns on veteran mode and he just knows, like, I've been here, seen it, done it. And this left back isn't going to stop me from either taking the ball in a tight space or getting it to someone further up the pitch than me. Yang could have done a little bit better. I was maybe a wee bit surprised that they didn't swap wingers around in the first half just to mix things up, because they did a bit of that. But Donovan, even when they did do that, you've seen Donovan get really narrow into the pitch, almost into that Greg Taylor kind of off the ball kind of spot. And for a guy of his stature, that's like really good for clogging up space as well. And if we do win the ball, it's a really good, the knock-on effects. It's just good to have. Something we want. Tierney does it as well when it's on the other side. But Donovan, like I said after the Kelly game, 2 or 3 games like this, and like he's number 2 right back. And I think with that game being away in the venue it was, I think that's kind of where we're all sitting right now. He's had 3 away games in a row. He's not played at Celtic Park yet, and it's pass marks all round.
Another thing I'd point out is he's an advert for the academy guys coming through. Because I think for the last few years, Quinny, as soon as someone's had a sniff at the first team, they've been gone. And I don't know what the attitude is and amongst a group of players coming through and their contemporaries, where it's like, right, we'll get into the first team and then we'll go down and triple our money or double our money or whatever it is they do. Is that the ambition? I hope it's not. I want Celtic players to come through, establish themselves. You mentioned Dane Murray before, Brian. He makes his debut in Ange Postecoglou's first season. This is his 5th season as a first-team player, albeit he's lost a lot of football through the injuries. But I look at him, I look at Donovan, and I think to myself, guys like Francis Turley and Sean McArdle in the B team at the moment, looking up and saying, right, we've been in there. And they've proven that if you get a chance and take it, you'll stay in the squad. So I think it's a great advert for the academy boys coming through as well. Celtic follow-up comes in. There's a lot of chat around the midfield. Calmack's legs have gone, says Celtic follower.
I don't see it as a legs thing, because the second half is where he gets up the pitch a lot more. I think it's like somebody said it earlier, it might have been Brian, but I think it's like you can tell the defence are kind of going by McGregor a bit more last night rather than just always going to him. And it felt like that kind of deorientated, or what was, lost his orientation. Disorientated. There we go. Kind of him into the pattern of the game or whatever. So I do agree he's not at peak, but the legs thing, I just don't get it. Like, he's 32, he's not 42. You know what I mean?
I think he's in the wrong position, mate. I mean, listen, I said this like 2 or 3 seasons ago. I don't think he's a number 6. I just don't. And I can see it domestically, never mind in Europe. But I watched it today in the first half, like you say, he was definitely worse in the first half, as Brian mentioned, right? But he's getting the ball, and it's really, really bizarre, and I don't know why he does it. So you can see the out ball. Let's take Donovan, for example, right? You can see it, and he's pointing to Donovan, but instead of making the pass himself, Quinny, he'll pass it back to Scales or Carter Vickers and point as if to say, you make the second pass. Why not just make that pass? Open it up a wee bit. And I can't understand why someone with his ability and his experience does that. Is there a reason that I'm missing here? Because he does it so often.
It's like he's been hypnotized, isn't it? Like, it's just like, like he just can't not do it. Even like the most exciting thing about McGregor in that position is that he's a way better footballer than Scott Brown. You expect McGregor in that position to be like a good football player, drop the shoulder, by that half, the centre circle, get through that yourself, play a 1-2 with Fatati, switch it to a winger, do stuff like that. That ball we mentioned with Scales, balls, somebody called it a McGregor ball earlier. Those kind of long range dink passes, he does them on occasion. He did get into the box second half. I do hasten to add, he did get better as the game went on. But it is like maddening especially when you're aware of it and you see it, and it's like the right back is right in front of you, but you give it to the centre back and then tell him to give it to the right back.
I know.
And it's just like, what? There's no gain from that. There's only, like, you're only losing time. And now they're going to read that the ball's going to go to him because you're telling them, we're going to pass to that guy over there, everyone.
Give us a minute.
Yeah. Him now. It's just like, why?
I said to you during the game, Quinny, there was 2 things. I asked you the question. I says, right, first thing, can Callum McGregor carry the ball? because he never seemed to do it in the first half. And then in the second half, he does it. There was one moment where he takes the ball, like you say, right up to the edge of the penalty area. The other thing I said to you is does Benji Negrin have any pace? And you were saying, well, I don't know if he does, but he doesn't have get around the park, and he was basically covering Yang's role as well as his own kind of number 8. We play with the 2 number 8s, and he's on the right hand side. So I guess the question will be, Brian, what do we do with this midfield? Because I don't think it is that effective at the moment. Rio Hatate, for all he's running and sweating buckets, and I'm sure he's got the kilometres in and all that stuff, the creative spark which he is, known for, doesn't seem to be there at the moment. I think Negrin, I even seen him getting stick this morning. I don't think he was just responsible for setting up Ian Urah. I seen him setting up another great chance for the centre forward that he missed. He had a good chance himself, brilliant cutback by Kieran Tierney. He needs to get a little bit of flight on that. And then, but he gets himself into that position. And all I seen actually all night was a really good performance by Negrin, the best midfielder of the 3, in my view. But the midfield's not working for me, Brian. And I don't think Callum McGregor's a number 6. So who's the 3 you start with, really? On the basis of what happened last night and what's been going on this season. Luke McCowan's not had great daily football. Bernardo, Engels have just minutes here and there, but none of them have had a great deal of game time. Do you mix it up? I think you need to, actually.
I think a change of shape is needed as opposed to just the personnel, because we don't have that natural sort of ball-winning midfielder. So I think, and I alluded to it earlier, so I don't think McGregor's legs have gone, but I think they've gone for that position, if that makes sense. So he was able to play that number 6 role because he had that burst of pace, and he could time how to get in position to block or win the ball back. It was never really his natural game. I think he's lost a bit of that, but he's still good enough that further forward to pick those bursts into the box or drive forward with the ball. But I just think that when we're under a bit of pressure, I think that's where he gets lost. And that's what I was saying at the start. I think maybe you get, say, like a Bernardo or an Engels next to him, who can sort of cover that ground for him almost and just release him with the ball and let him try and take play further forward and play those little incisive passes that he can do, or carry that wee extra step. Because he's a very, very clever player. And to Quinny's point, I do think it's funny when he starts doing the air traffic control stuff in the middle of the park, because you go, well, just you do it. Whereas if he's further forward, he started to do that in the second half. So when he was taking the ball, he started darting in and looking for the pass and pinging it and getting it wide, as opposed to having to tell someone. So I think we need to change the shape and have 2 sitters almost. And have McGregor, if he's going to play there, next to someone, or move him forward and have probably... I don't know who is the 6th though, because people keep saying Engels. I don't know if the big man's disciplined enough for to sit in the 6th. I think he desires to go forward. Bernardo considers himself, more of an attacking player. I think he's probably better suited to winning the ball and covering the ground. But I don't think either of them, I don't think any of the 3 are actually suited to that position. So I think we need to change shape. And actually, I think say you had the 2 and then say Negrin behind any actual, I actually think that dovetails really nicely, or Hatate being able to just find the wee pockets of space and move about with freedom, as opposed to having to track back all over the place. So I think a change of shape is needed, honestly, because it's just not quite working. And I think it goes back to my point about Ida, actually, and the sort of the structure of the team and the recruitment. And this is where I think Rodgers has to take some culpability, because we're playing a system that I don't think the players are suited to play. Like, I think Engels, Hatate, Negrin, Bernardo, McGregor, they're all good players. I just don't think they necessarily suit a sort of 3 in midfield like that. I think that it should be like the 2 sitters and 1 forward, or just change the system round about a bit. You might have, I remember I was screaming, when it was transfer gate and we were only signing anybody in and we kept shouting about wingers, and I said, I think on here or in the group chat or whoever would listen to me, I said it to somebody, but I says, why don't we just change to a diamond in midfield? And if McGregor a bit deeper, they can get Engels, Tati and Negrin in, since we've no good wingers anyway, and play Maeda up front next to, say, Kenny or Ida, whoever was there. But Rodgers doesn't seem to want to change the system. Well, actually, he doesn't seem to want to change the formation. And that's what I find weird, because you can play the same system, but a different shape. The logic applies. You can be a high-pressing team, you can be defensively focused, you can play possession football. You don't need to play the 4-3-3 all the time. And I saw people saying before, well, you know, players are trained that way and they play that way and it's too difficult. Well, what happens if you've got 10 men? You need to change shape. So you're not going to tell me players can't change a formation. Like you two boys, if you're playing 11s and say, right, Quinny, do us a favour, go it right. You're not going to go, what? Right wing, I have no idea what I'm doing. This is mental. I can't play here and sit on the floor. You're just going to play right wing because you know what a winger should do. So professional footballers aren't going to have their minds blown if you change shape. And I think that's what Rodgers has to do, because otherwise, unless we recruit properly in January, and we'll not talk about that yet, I think we need to change the shape. I really do.
You know, on that point, Brian, and I'll throw this one over to you, Quinny. You're in a situation where nothing much is happening in the midfield. The first half was really frustrating to watch back, actually. And you've got McGregor doing that thing where he's telling everybody what he's going to do. And then you've got Hatate not creating anything. I think the original point I made about that established players, they should be able to figure that out themselves. You know, we're talking about Rodgers, we're talking about shape and the fact that he's quite rigid, etc., etc. But within the game, you know, if something's not working, they must be able to adapt. I mean, Callum McGregor playing that same pass 15 times in the first 20 minutes of the game, and it doesn't create a single moment where we actually, you know, progress into their final third. Surely in his mind, he can say, I'm going to mix it up. He doesn't need permission to do that. And it's like Rio Hatate, you know, for what the position he's playing, not to make an incisive and a decisive through ball through that. Not once. That's not on the manager, it's on the player. You know, and it's sometimes I do think that these guys, particularly the seasoned pros who have been through the campaigns, need to take more responsibility, Quinny, in match.
Yeah, I think it kind of touches on a lot of different points. In some ways, like in terms of like the initial thing, like how do you move on from the midfield from here? Like, you know, Brian mentions the diamond shape. I did in my pre-match preview for the game, thinking about what he might do with right wing. You maybe lean into Negren playing on the right, and the fact that he will be narrow, and you kind of think of the midfield as like a box almost, you know, with the you know the way you can kind of shape it out from there. So you know, maybe that's something, I don't know. Also no sign of it last night. But I do think probably the answer to getting a better midfield for the weekend and then for Braga is you drop Hatate for Engels, and you just, because the thing with Engels, and I kind of harp on this every time we talk about him, but his best minutes for Celtic has been on the left of the midfield three, and anytime he's played with Hatate, that's Hatate's gig, you know. So he's always playing on the right. If he's playing with Rio, play him on the left with Negren, you know, and you know McGregor's McGregor, but you know that's something that's a kind of a longer kind of situation, isn't it, rather than getting ready for Hibs and Braga. But you know, Negren is like itching to get going. I think if you give him a game like Hibs, let's see how he does for that, then maybe judge Braga at that point. I think he could complement Negren pretty well. I think he would benefit from playing alongside Ian Urah as well, and you know, Taneki on the left hand side. So I think that's got good potential to be like an easy win potentially, but it depends on what the manager thinks, because Hatate has been almost impervious to, you know, rotation and whatever. And I get that kind of feeling with him, because he's one of these guys you just leave in the deep end and then he starts swimming and everyone's happy with it eventually. But you know, when you've got someone like Engels, who you've got to think the kind of strategy with him, with the team, like the coaches and whatever, is to have him really chapping at the bit. Like you've got to earn getting back in the team right now. Like when we put you back in, you have got to be killing it, you know. And yeah, he's not really done that from the bench yet. But you know, whenever I've seen him come off the pitch, off the bench, I think he really does look like he's really trying to do everything, and with a bit more time on the pitch, playing with the first choice players rather than the other subs that are joining him from the bench, you know, into the game when he joins on later, would do him a lot of good. But in terms of the tactics and the shape of it all, like I think it's very right that you don't need to change the shape to change the you know, you don't need to change the philosophy and the formation. You can do either one of them and keep whatever one you want. So I agree with that. But I do think it's a little bit of we're really painted into a corner by a lot of the players we've got, like that we can't mix it up too much. Like, because I think really all things being equal, you would probably go to like a back three if you walked into this squad today as a new manager and just looked at it. You'd probably go, you know, Tierney, Scales, Vickers, and you know, and then just work it out from there. Just put more attackers on the pitch and just try and score more goals, because the way things are shaping up, it's going to be hard to play Dyson at centre forward. It's going to be really hard to play Dyson at left wing, and he's not going to be playing right wing. So, like, where do you play him? You know, all of a sudden. And I know people are saying, last thing I'll say, and I'll kind of let you come in on it, of course, right? But I see some of the chat saying, like, guys checked out, we should sell this guy will be moved on, right? If we are going to be selling Yang, Hatate, and Maeda, if we bench them, it just craters their value, which is something to think about as well, you know? So I know you can't play players to keep them in the shop window. I get all that chat, but it's just a reality of the situation. Like, if we just bomb the 3 of them out, play Engels, play Ian Urah, and play Forrest or McGregor, just like, you know, then what do you do come January? You're going to get a fraction, because it's kind of like when you're negotiating with the club, they're going to go, well, you're not even bloody playing them, so why would we pay you 25 million for them? Kind of thing.
Connie, can I ask you a question? So
Yeah.
just because I'm interested, and you say something that I've thought about myself. See with Engels, right? And this is for both of you in the comments as well. Do you think part of the reason I don't want to say struggle, because I think he's contributed a lot to the last season, but do you think he's trying too hard to do everything? Because at points it feels, because I agree with you, I think when he comes on, sometimes he's desperate to impress, but it almost felt like he felt his value, because we talk about him being judged on everyone saying, oh, he's 11 million quid, but if he was 2 million quid, everyone would love him, right? But it almost feels like when I've watched him at times, especially in Scotland, not as much in Europe, because I think he's been better in Europe. I think it suits him more. But in the SPFL, it almost looks like he feels he has to be the best at everything. And I think it's hurting him. And I don't know if maybe I'm just insane and I'm projecting, but it feels like that's something it looks like it's a bit of a problem for him. What's your take?
At the moment, I agree with you, Brian. There was a point last season where he was just basically flying and he was in his rhythm. And I remember him getting a man of the match after the game, and McGregor saying something about his dad doing all the votes because he had won 5 out of 7 man of the matches. There was periods last season where he was just, he was just waltzing games. But I think you're right. I think players can overthink it, Brian. And it's almost as if I need to make an impact. I'm only getting 10 or 15 minutes here, or I'm getting a first start in a while. I need to make an impact. So they're trying to impress all over the park, rather than just sticking to what they're good at and doing what's natural to them, Quinny. Absolutely. I think footballers suffer for that. And, just turned 22. I think the transfer fee's huge. I actually blame the club. I put a tweet out earlier on today in relation to that, spoke about it in more detail earlier this week. £11 million was not the fee. No. That's down to a poor negotiation. That's poor negotiation by Michael Nicholson. You look at the initial fees that were quoted for the 3 players that we brought in, because they're all chucked into the same bucket at the moment. When you think about Austin Trusty, Ida and Engels, £26 million. You've wasted £26 million. Brendan can't be trusted with a checkbook. We hear all this stuff all the time, Quinny, and it's nonsense. It's far more nuanced than that, right? But the 2 guys that are still at the football club, the initial fees that were being discussed was £5 million for Trusty and £6.5 million for Arnie Engels. Now, to get him for that price would have been an absolute steal, actually, when you look at his age profile and everything else. But I still look at last season, Brian, like that purple patch that he had where he's winning man of the matches every other week. He's playing really well in the Champions League. He's in double figures, albeit most of his goals were penalties. He had as many assists in the Champions League as Matt O'Reilly did in one campaign, which was a record high for a number of seasons, and everything was going well. I thought he was brilliant in the 4-2 game against Villa. He was outstanding that night, So he's not turned into a bad player overnight, but there is a mentality whereby I think players can try too hard, Quinny. He's trying to impress the gaffer, and he's trying to force it a wee bit,
Yeah, I think I think you're both quite on the money with it from how I read it with Engels. Certainly, like, he does try to be the best at everything. He's trying to win every ball, win every header, balls. I thought last night I was so, like, I don't know if gutted for him is the way to put it, but he played a good ball down the line for what would have been Balikwisha, and it just was off. It just never connected. And yeah, so I think, like, a part of the thing with Engels is he is like a good example of, he would be a really good player on a really good team, where part of the machine being a cog of, like, a very good team, he will continue to make it better. But he's not the sort of guy that you put into a bad team and it could be a one-man show and he could be, right, guys, I'm going to win this game for you, or I'll get us up the table, or, that kind of thing. So when he's been good before, like, you could probably look at the rest of the team and go, who else was playing well? And it's like, he's one of those, he's a cog in the machine kind of guy. As much as anything, which is why, like, I think if Ian Urah was going to play like that, the centre forward, and the way that Negren plays, I think would maybe because again, the main problem I had last night in terms of how easy we were to play through and the whole midfield McGregor chat and whatever is the last night the way we set up was like the way we've set up like a few weeks ago or the way we have done for quite a lot is the midfield three are like all spread out and so far apart. And if you look at the Kelly game and the Partick Thistle game, the best moments of the game is when Hatate and Negren are both on one side of the pitch. And that kind of happened a little bit more as the game wore on last night. But I think Negren style of, because it's Negren that does that, Hatate does still stick to the rules of engagement as by Brendan Rodgers. You know, he won't maybe go into places he's not meant to, but Negren will still do that. So I think that would be good for Engels to have someone that will play the way Negren does to help him in, you know, those kind of midfield attack areas.
There was a couple of times, Quinn, I remember you turning around to me and saying, look at the distances between the three midfielders. Yeah. Honestly, it was so stretched and it was unnecessary. Paul McQuaid, in you come. You're on the YouTube for a Rodgers team going into the third season. I was expecting a lot more in Europe, but except it might be down to the lack of support at board level. Well, I had a good chat after the game with a few of those in attendance at the fan zone. And I was just talking again about the Kairat game, the potential impact that Tunetke could have had. The fact that we didn't really have to sell Nicholas Kuhn before those two matches. We would have still got our money after those two matches for him. Why not get into the Champions League first and then we can do the business? So yes, absolutely. Baldy Trucker, always a pleasure to see you tuning in. Maida has checked out and how Hatate is still getting a game is mind-boggling. I think there has to be a discussion about the three guys, and I'm putting Rio into this simply because Brendan Rodgers name-checked him when he was initially talking about Dyson Maida. And this wasn't the conversation where he confirms that Maida has obviously made it known that he wanted to leave in February. It was previous to this. And he put Rio and Dyson in the same kind of bracket of guys that are coming to the end of their cycle. And I think it's normalised and fans accept that this happens, etc. That was a wee bit earlier in the transfer window. And it raised a few concerns. So I don't know Rio's state of mind. I know that Brendan Rodgers has spoken about tapping into his mindset. But Yang, I mean, Callum McGregor spoke about Dyson Maida emptying his locker at Lennox Town. You know, he was on his way. Yang, I think he'd said his goodbyes. Yang obviously had been down to Birmingham. That move was happening. And there has to be a discussion about these two guys. Quinny makes a great point, Brian, right? You can't just bench them because really we'll be moving these guys on in January if everything works properly and we manage to get guys in the door, which, by the way, I'm not holding my breath about. But you can't just drop them, Brian, because then what you're doing is you've got almost like an asset that's depreciating in value for the next few months.
Yeah, I think there's another aspect to it as well, because, and you saw it last night, so I thought Dyson had a rotter last night. I thought he looked really frustrated, but I don't think that's because he's checked out and wants to leave. I think he just had a bit of a horror show of a game. But what happens is when he gets hooked at half time, people say, see, he's checked, he's not interested, but doesn't want to play. He's fed up. So what happens is if they then drops Hatate, people will see he doesn't want to play, get him out. And then the narrative around these players, if they come back in, are they going to feel like that's what they're getting accused of? Do you know what I mean? Like it's a hard act to manage. I think essentially, and it's the simplest answer, is they have to just be managed on merit. So Maida deserved to get taken off last night because he was having a bad game. That's it. I think with Hatate, I don't think Hatate, I can't remember the last game. And I think he's a quality footballer, but I can't remember the last game I went, Hatate was class today. What a player. He was excellent. He really stitched the midfield together. I genuinely can't. So he needs to get dropped. So for Rodgers, he can't worry about controlling the narrative. He just has to go, right, who's in form and who isn't. And I think unless he looks at Bernardo, Engels and McCowan in training and they're all having a jolly, and Hatate and Negri are the ones that's trying, there's got to be some changes there. In terms of Yang, I've said kind of for the start, he's full of endeavour, but he's no good enough for Celtic. He just isn't. And he can have flashes where he comes up and he scores a couple of goals in his wee purple patch, but he's not got the mentality or the ability to play for Celtic. He's a good football player, and he seems a nice boy, and I hope he's a good career. I don't wish any bad on him, but he's not good enough. But because of the recruitment, we're forced to play him. Because quite simply, as much as we love Jimmy Forrest, I think he's a club legend, a hero. He can't play 90 minutes every week anymore. especially not twice a week. So you either put someone out of position, you change shape, or you try and persevere with Forrest. And what he's chosen out of the three, because he's scared to change shape, apparently, doesn't want to play Forrest all the time, so he's having to play Yang. Whereas if you look at Taneki on the other side last night, he didn't have a particularly great game, but he was still trying, and eventually made that burst through.
Yeah.
Aye, and eventually did make that burst through and then get taken off, to be fair. However, I think that was credit to their right back, Sol. I thought he was excellent for them last night, to be fair, and he really, really controlled that area. So I think Taneki was maybe just up against a really, really good defender. But it certainly wasn't an attitude. Whereas Yang, you looked like you've just not got it. So yeah, so in terms of the players maybe don't want to be there or want to leave, I think you look. I don't necessarily 100% believe players just down tools. Like, I don't think Maeda seems the type's going to go, right, no, I wanted to leave and you never let me leave. That's it. I've had enough. I think he's probably come out and spoke about it because he thinks this is the reality, but I'm here, I'm going to keep playing. You saw his reaction when he scored and he was doing the thing. And the wee man's the Terminator, right? He never shows any emotion. But he was hanging the badge and he was up for it and he was sending a message. So I don't think his performance last night was because he couldn't be bothered. I think he just had a stinker. I think Hatate the same. I don't get the impression Hatate's phoning it in. I just think he used to be, he was inconsistent and within game. I used to say he was like Samaras. Within a couple of minutes you knew what you were getting. He was going to have a blinder and he was going to have a shocker. Whereas now he's having more poor games than great ones, I think, is the reflection. But I don't necessarily think it's an attitude thing. And even with Yang, I think he's just not good enough. I don't necessarily believe it's an attitude thing. But of course, we're never going to know. We don't know.
The example I always use when people talk about down and tools, because I agree with you, there have been examples of players who refuse to play.
Edward famously was the big man, just didn't fancy it.
Boyata. Remember Boyata for the Ike Athens games. I think that players like Virgil van Dijk have down tools in their career to get moves and all this. It does happen, right? But I always go back to this example. And the example is the great Roy Aitken, who bizarrely enough, when we did a gig with him a couple of years ago, he told us that in the 15-year span of him making his debut and playing his final game, 75 to 1990, never once did he miss a game through injury. Never once. He did comment. He missed a few through suspension. There was a few red cards in a bit there, but never once through injury, which I thought was an incredible stat. But if you read Billy McNeil's books, what he'll tell you is a change. There was a change at a moment, and I'm not talking about checking out, whereby Roy Aitken was always the first in at training and always the last out. And there was a moment, there was a change. And it was almost as if he was just doing what he had to do. He came in and he did what he had to do. And why is it different for footballers? I mean, we've all been in working environments where, you've maybe given your notice, or in here you've given your notice, and you're not given that wee bit extra. So it's not checking out. It's maybe just that bit extra. Especially if, for example, the club have said, we couldn't do it, but you will be leaving in January. But the one thing Yang has done, because I have been critical of the player. He is one of the only, I suppose you could call, successes of the 2023-24 summer transfer window, right? Because if you read through them, Iwata, gone, Home, on loan, Tilio, away, right? You've got Yang, he's still at the football club, Kwon, long gone, Norowski, Lagerbielke, Palma, Phillips, Bernardo, interestingly enough. But he only came in on loan. So he is the one of the final remnants of that particular transfer window. And one of these days we'll stop talking about that transfer window. Celts for Life says, what is wrong with starting Luke, Arnie and Paulo to see what they have got? I think it's one of these ones again where...
Against who?
I know. When's the opportunity to do that? I looked at Negren last night, Quinny, and I just thought, he was getting a bit stick even this morning, and I watched it with interest. And I think to myself, he's a starter. He's a starter in the Celtic team. There's no way he gets dropped. James Kerwin, Cal McIntyre dropped anchor last night, very sluggish. Wasn't for a lack of trying in Hatate's case, I've got to say. And Veggie Man on the YouTube, it's time for Rodgers to change the midfield. McGregor needs dropped. I think he needs to move position. Get Bernardo in, give McKeown a start versus Hibs, plus Negrin definitely plays for me, that's for sure. A slightly different change of subject. I'm going to bring this one in. Tory ratting because it's 55 minutes into the show and we've not mentioned them yet. Is Peter Lowell going? Well, you thought we were going to go through that whole show and not mention the board there for a minute. Peter Lowell, I don't know. There's been no update because the club don't communicate. But what I would say is, I found it. I was going to use the overused word interest. It wasn't interesting and it wasn't unexpected that Neil Lennon was standing up for the board last night when he was on Premier Sports. And obviously there's a lot of discussion around this. I just think it comes down to this, guys, right? And it's nothing personal. Neil Lennon's completely out of touch with what the majority of Celtic fans are currently discussing through the fan movement, Celtic Fans Collective, which isn't just a few people in an echo chamber. You know, this has grown from an open letter that was signed by over 420 groups of Celtic fans, from fan media channels to associations, affiliations, CSCs, ultra groups, you know, all represented on this letter. So it's a feeling that you can never ever go into the stormy waters, Quinny, of speaking for all Celtic fans. Of course you can't. But that open letter spoke for a hell of a lot of Celtic fans. And Lennon comes out and he backs up the board and he stands up for the board. It's not as simple, it's not as black and white as that, Quinny, right? You could tell us all day long that the board do a great job, they make all this money, look at the success, etc., etc. Let's focus on what they don't do as well, as give them the success, give them the credit for that. Excellent. The famous quote of Brian Degnan, they're millionaires who could be billionaires. That's Celtic Football Club. You look at the 7 out of 10 failures at qualification level in the Champions League and the lost revenue. You look at the lost revenue this season, not because we were prepared and we were firing and we were up against a better team, because we went in and we hadn't done the work in the recruitment and we fell flat and we bounced out the Champions League. Who's being held responsible? Because at the moment, nobody is being held responsible, because all they keep saying is, oh, but look at the success that you've had. This is a major failing at boardroom level, at recruitment level, right? At executive level. What's going to happen? Well, you're going to roll out all the people who are part of the clique and the nodding dogs to say, oh, you are doing a great job. The fans should be, you know, applauding every single time you walk in the stadium. Give me peace. Give me peace, Quinny. That is so far removed from reality. It's unreal, but no surprise to me.
Yeah, I think I've got a few things to say on that. So I think the first part is, like, you need to be accountable in these things. Like, see, if you want praise for anything, like you want praise for the success, you want the praise for the trophies, you want the praise for the bank balance, then when things go right, you're saying it's your fault. You know, you're taking accountability. You're saying, oh, I'm because, you know, so when it goes wrong, that's the way that deal works. If you want credit for all that stuff, you need to own all of the backfires. And then in my mind, I kind of go one step beyond that. What are you taking credit for? Like you always say, Paul John, they're not exactly scoring hat-tricks every week themselves, you know? So what are they actually taking credit for, right?
What was Ian Bankier's assists like? I can't quite remember.
Yeah. They're taking credit for making money on Dembele, making money on Ayer, Van Dijk. That's what we should be giving them credit for. That's what we should be all thankful and quiet for, essentially. Well, if that's the good thing, well, what's the thing that we're upset about? If that's the scale of, this is how amazing we are. We sold Christopher Ayer for 11 million and Odsonne Edouard for 9 million, whatever. Then losing to Kyra, and then that whole roll of teams, you know, how much have we missed out on the Champions League this year? Just to give a random number, let's just say it's 30 million. It's probably 60, but let's just say it's 30. So every time we miss out on it, it's 30. We've missed out on it 7 out of 9 times. So that's 7 30s that you've lost us. So the transfer stuff you want credit for, we put that on the scale of what we're talking about here. It's upside down, you know. So even though there's a few wee things on that scale or whatever, it's totally outweighed by everything else. If they're scoring hat-tricks, if they're picking the team and all that stuff, then we're talking about a different conversation all of a sudden. But if you want to talk about the club operations and look how good we are and we should be taking criticism, then you need to it needs to be a fair balance of what we're talking about, isn't it?
I totally agree with that. And talking about picking a team, I mean, back in the day, but pre-Jock Stein, there was a team picking selection committee, and it was the board. It was the member of the boards that did that, and Jock Stein made the change. I had to have full control. He says that in an interview from the 1960s or 70s, right? But the closest you can get to picking a team is buying players, Brian, and that has been happening. And even just this season, when Brendan Rodgers talks about club signings, and obviously the club aren't happy with that terminology, and he's told to change that to signings for the future. That's people out with the football decision-making process, buying footballers, and then basically presenting you with them and saying, right, there's your ingredients, make it work. That's far too close. So you're absolutely right. They should not get all the credit for the endeavours of the football department. Yeah, they're part of it. They're absolutely part of it. But when I look at that £80 million, it's almost as if they want credit for even having that in the bank by saying that's because we're really good at trading players. Well, what's to say that is where that money went? What's to say that's not the season ticket money or the merchandise money that we've all put in from our rapidly shrinking bank accounts, right? Yet you're sitting on it. So you can't just say that's that money. You can't just ring fence transfer money and say that's what's sitting in the bank, because it's not. It's a collective, isn't it? So, Brian, you're always going to get this. And, I've seen a lot of it online. A lot of it's probably bot generated, AI generated, people standing up for the board. That's what the politicians do, isn't it? All these parties that are trying to create a narrative and create this sense that we're all entitled and we're all spoiled and all this kind of stuff. The worst thing you can say to a football fan who dedicates lots of their life, their time, their effort, and their finances to a football club is that you're spoilt because you want what's best for that club.
Well, there's a number of things to unpack, and I know we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I won't ramble too much. What I would say is, if you're going to take credit for things, right, so if you're going to say, look at the trophies in the cabinet, that's thanks to us, then you need to also take, you need to also accept that you failed at times. So it's like being a football manager. If you take credit for every win, you also need to take the blame for every loss, right? It's just logical. So if you're the board, even if you're saying, yeah, look at all the trophies there, you also have to say, but we made a James Blunt in Europe. Do you know what I mean? Like you got to, and that's what the fans are asking for. We know we've got loads of trophies domestically. We get it. We all know that. We're not stupid. But what we're saying is, look at what we could have had. Like, look at where we could have been. Look at what we could have done. Like, you can't have both. So the board can't. It's not the fans versus the board because we're in a huff because we get beat off Kyra. It's the fact that we go, look at what the club should be. Look at what it could be. What is your plan? Talk to us. Treat us with respect. Like, there's this contempt. They don't want to tell us anything. And I've not seen Neil Lennon's comments, and I kind of don't want to because I love Lennon and I hold him in such high esteem. But you go, it's not. I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding with people. And you mentioned sort of politics, and it's become almost political. It's became tribal. It's you either support the board or you support the fans, and that's it. And it's like, oh no, because there's nuance to it. It's not like we just hate the board because of the board. We go, we want to be accountable because you run the football club. That's it. Be accountable. Tell us who's accountable for what part. Tell us how these parts knit together. Tell us how these things work. How does the pathway manager work? What does that look like over a 10-year period? What's your objectives? What's the plan to get Celtic from, this club in Scotland to one of the best clubs in Europe in terms of competition and how we do? Where's your plan there? You've got a Adidas merchandising deal. What does that look like over a 10, 15-year period? What happens next? How does that even work? How do you gauge fan approach? Are you happy with the strips? There's nothing there. There's all this sort of noise and no one knows, and the board just go, well, cause shut it, look at the trophies. And you go, well, that's not good enough. That's not good enough.
Is that on Michael Nicholson's whiteboard?
Club.
That's what
You're the chairman of a football club. You tell us what the plan. Don't tell us there is a plan. Sit down, don't worry about it. Tell us what the plan is. And the thing about it is, right, see if I was this PR agency that's came in that they've hired. The PR team has hired someone to deal with their PR, right? I hired a PR company to deal with their own PR team, right? Madness. But I'd be saying to them, look, what to do is tell the fans specifically, answer those 7 questions. Answer them. Tell the fans this is what they plan to use the money for. This is the aim. Whether they agree or not is largely irrelevant. because you go, look, this is the plan. This is what we think it's going to work. This is where we see it going. We've thought about it. We've considered it. We've spoken to the best minds in the football business. This is how we think the club's going to progress. You can be happy about it. You can be sad about it, but that's largely the way it is. Let's discuss. But if you just don't tell people anything and expect them not to get wound up, like, see if you went down to Marks and Spencer's for your shopping, right, or Aldi if you're shopping, depending what your preference is, and it was just shut randomly, and there's somebody standing behind the door like that, and you're going, what time do you open? And they're going,
No
no telling you. You'd be raging, right? Because you're going, well, you're a company, you're providing a service. How you know telling us what's happening? What time is we need to get a message, need to get the food in for the weigh-in. So it's just these basic things that this club as a company, whether it's football operations or business operations, simply are not doing. They're not fit for purpose. That's the concern. It's not that fans are spoiled and we think we deserve everything. Celtic Football Club would be the best supported club in the world if we were finishing 5th or 6th in the table. We'd still have people turning it all the time because we love the club. We'd still be passionate about it. We'd still be asking questions. We'd still be ambitious if we're winning the Champions League, because we go, right, how do we win the next Champions League? Because they're actually nature of being a football fan and a Celtic fan. So it's not about entitlement or being spoiled. It's about a club that's badly run and badly communicated, and that's all we're asking for. Who's accountable and why? It's not us against them, and people need to get their head around that, in my opinion.
You're right, and I'll go back to this because somebody brought it up. They weren't calling us glory hunters. They brought up the term glory hunter. And what you've just said there, Brian, is so true, because when things were at their absolute worst, we challenged it, we got organised, we asked the difficult questions. And when things are apparently at their absolute best, if you want to look at success, money in the bank, etc., we act the exact same way, because we want to hold these people to account. It's not just about trophies in the cabinet. It's about how the football club is being run. It was completely mismanaged back then, and it's being mismanaged in many, many different avenues now. And that's why it's going to be challenged, and it's not going to go away. And like you say, answer the 7 questions. There's your first step to, building the bridges. Answer the 7 questions. Then go to the collective and say, right, I need 3 or 4 of your representatives to attend a meeting with the CEO, with the chairman. I wouldn't even bring Brendan Rodgers into this equation, because he's not answerable to any of the questions, right? With the finance director, the chief financial officer, bring these people in, let's sit down, and then let's figure out how we can work together to get some kind of a solution. We're not even at that point. That would be day one. And I'm not a PR guru, but that would be day one of how to resolve this issue and retain and regain some of the harmony. I'd much rather be playing in the Champions League, ladies and gents, but last night it was a Europa League and I was up for it, and I watched the game live with Quinny and a few others. Jim Orr was in the room or in the backyard as well. I want us to do well in this particular tournament. There are things we need to tweak if we want to get out of the league stages. That is for sure. I'm not sure who plays right wing. That's my biggest concern. Maybe we should throw Tony Ralston in there. Could only do better than Yang. Anyway, is there any free agents? Who knows? Let's check Y-Scout. Right, thanks every single one of you for getting involved. Lots happening at the moment, but I've got to say, for the 11th time, a Celtic State of Mind have been nominated for an award at the Football Content Awards. Now, this award ceremony is across the board. It's not fan media, it's media, it's Sky Sports, it's the overlap. It's all these people with massive budgets, giving people 10 grand an appearance fee and all this kind of stuff. And I know Brian and Quinny don't get that, right? But we're there and we're going toe to toe with all these big organisations. And it's the 11th time we've been in the final, and we would love to bring the trophy up. If you want to help us out, you can vote. All the details are underneath this video. We are up for Best Podcast International, right? There's not many categories that a Scottish podcast can actually be eligible for these days, but we are eligible for that one. And I think we're one of 10 or 12 finalists. If you fancy giving us a wee vote, it would be much appreciated. Then we can get our glad rags on, go down to Ellen Roads and hopefully win it. So thanks everybody for getting involved, and thank you to Brian and Quinny for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.